Do you like me to look at you or at the camera?
Well, I have to lower the... There,
There we go.
there we go. Okay. So I saw the movie. This movie is an example, I think, of a filmmaker who's put in his 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell would put it.
Right.
Because you've made how many shorts?
I mean,
Five?
Five, yeah. Of the ones that played at festivals, probably like 4 or 5.
And
And then
then
lots that never, no one will ever see.
and you've worked as an editor for how? Can you imagine? Can you sort of say how many?
I
Quite
mean,
a few independent films.
yeah, I think there's like probably 4 or 5 again, that have like sort of broken out because you always work on the ones that are your, quote unquote practice that, both in terms of things I've made as a director and also as an editor that never have quite made it out there, which is fine. And then at a certain point they started getting out there. So I think, in the past 2 years especially, there have been a number of films that I think have gotten their due, and I'm glad they have.
And
Yeah.
you've worked as a cinematographer as well.
That was an accidental thing, but yes, I did. I would never in a million years claim to be a cinematographer, but I have done. I've somehow wound up with that credit.
And so you've helped a lot of other people make their films, and you've been part of this group of people that help each other. How would you describe that group and how it came to be? Because a lot of you met each other at film festivals.
Yeah, I mean, a good way to look at it is like, in any given town, Austin, New York is a really good example. You've got a film community that I think is very, a very inclusive and friendly and supportive film community. And what I found going to film festivals is that you could have that same thing but on a national or even global scale, and that you would make friends there that because you are doing the same thing and endeavoring towards the same goals and having the same tastes, that you could make friends, that live in different cities or in different countries, and they would be as fast a friendship as, someone that you grew up with. And it really clicked, going to South by Southwest, in 2006, 2007, meeting filmmakers there, and then my short film started playing around that same time, and really just developing some really fast friendships, and as is the case with any friends or people you admire, you want to help them out and hope that they'll help you out, and so we all just sort of started just hanging out and helping each other out, and it was a situation where you see each other all over the country over the course of a year, and so geographical boundaries sort of fell away, and I would travel all over to help people make their films too, and it was, I held plenty of boom mics and I don't know sometimes I wouldn't even know what credit I'd be getting in the movie. I'd just be there to help, and that's just because I like doing it and I believe in what someone's doing as a filmmaker. I'd want to help out and be a part of it, and it'd be exciting. And
So when you finally felt that you could make this film, it's on a much bigger scale than a lot. Like, for example, Saint Nick was what, 6,000?
It was about 12,000. Yeah. At the end of the day.
But were you able to call in your chits in a way on this, or how did you proceed with?
I don't know if it was necessarily like I had earned up a reservoir of favors I could call in. It was more that I think the work spoke for itself in a way, and both with Saint Nick and with Pioneer, the short film that I made after that, I think suggested to people that this film was worth taking a chance on, because when you make a $12,000 film, it'd be great to make that money back, and luckily we did, but it's such a small investment that it's not a huge risk. And then as you start getting higher and higher, the films get riskier and riskier as far as business propositions go. And with this film, I think we had the script, and then the short film and Saint Nick, both along with it, I think gave people confidence that I could pull it off, and it didn't seem like such a huge jump or a huge risk. It was like, yeah, this is the right step to go, and the right direction to go, and that was for everybody. Everybody in front of the camera, behind the camera, across the board, I think just felt that they believed that I knew what I was talking about because I could, show them the films and they liked them. So.
Well, this movie has such precision. That was what I saw. I saw someone who was going after something and knew what they were going after and got it.
That's great.
Can you describe to me, what whether what you had to do to get what you wanted?
To get what I want, I mean, I'm always, it's something I think about a lot. Like, do I know what I want, or am I exacting enough? And I think the films that I love are very precise and very, and every shot means something. That's something I've always thought about. Every shot should, and it should convey something new. When you cut from a wide shot to a close-up, you're doing it for a reason. And when you cut, or when you don't cut at all, you're not cutting for a reason. You let something stay in a long shot for a long take. You're doing that intentionally. And so over the course of, that's what I was learning with my short films. Like, I really sort of like was teaching myself how to both express something personal cinematically, but also how to use the language of film to the best extent that I could, and to really utilize it, because I think it is a tremendous language that can be employed. And I really, I love films that are more random or chaotic, or that where you're just finding moments and capturing them. And we did a fair amount of that in St. Nick for sure, and some of that here as well. But I really wanted to, make a film in this case where everything counted, and when we did something, it was for a reason. And sometimes you're on set and you get carried away, and because it's so chaotic and you don't know, you don't remember exactly why you had planned to put a camera somewhere, but you just sort of trust your gut that you were like, when I was thinking about this, in the planning stages, there's probably a good reason for me to shoot it from this angle, and let's just go with that, and you hope that that's right, and usually you are right. And sometimes you have the wherewithal to realize that that's not the best place, and you find some wonderful new discovery, or you discover you don't need a shot that you thought you needed, and it's all about thinking about it a lot beforehand, putting a lot of thought into it, and then once you're shooting, just trusting your gut and knowing that you're going in the right direction, and that you know what it is you're doing. And I often think that you need to know that if you shoot the movie out of order, and that a shot that you get in scene 2 that you're shooting on day 14 is going to have an effect on scene 3 that you shot 2 weeks ago, and knowing how every little piece affects what's coming before and after, and trying to keep that in mind in a very ephemeral level, so that you're not constantly going crazy, but that you just have an idea of like how everything is going to kind of come together. And you make mistakes, and there's always moments where you have wonderful surprises in the editing room, and also some like, oh, why did I do that? But it usually, I found that trusting my instincts is the best thing I can do, and it usually pays off, and it worked pretty well in this one.
So this is a Western.
Yeah.
I described it as a neo-noir as well.
It has all of
elements
those.
of both genres. And I recognized, as I was watching it, that you were going for a sort of timeless quality. And the quality of the light, especially, has... What did you do to make that come out the way you did? Not just the magic hour shooting, but the sepia kind of palette.
For one thing is we didn't use any fluorescent lighting, or it was all just like old-fashioned Fresnels, and all, we tried to find older equipment, things that like none of the current modern lighting technology, like LEDs and things like that, we wouldn't use any of that, which helped give that quality of light.
What cameras were you using?
We shot on Arri 35mm and with Cook lenses, and we really wanted it to be as old-fashioned as possible, and that, Bradford Young and I spent, the entire, several weeks we had in prep just, going through old photographs and finding things we liked, and gradually narrowing like a huge catalog of images down to like 6 or 7 that represented each stage of the movie, and really came up with that palette in prep, so that once we got into the shoot, that we would know exactly what we needed for every location and so on and so forth. And
So you were moving from some colors to other colors in each sequence?
yeah, and degrees of like, like it's more like location from one location to the next. Like if there'd be a lot of, like for Ruth's house, how the light would come through the windows versus at Scarrett's shop, how that would feel. And then also like the shootout at the end, like just the way like we spent a lot of time figuring out how we wanted the nights to look, because that's the big night sequence, and we wanted to know.
You got some night shooting in there that looked semi-impossible to me.
It was
Like the darkest I've ever seen anything.
yeah, we really, I mean, we wanted it to be dark, and the daylight too. Like we wanted the whole time we were like, let's make this movie look like we shot it through a burlap bag. That's kind of like how we first discussed it, and when it got to the night scenes, we wanted it to be really, really dark, but yet still clear, so you could still see things. And we looked at like James Gray's films, like The Yards with Harris Savides, like they really pushed that to a really dark place where you still are getting an explosion. You've got the range of exposure you need, but it is perfectly dark at the same time, and that's what we were after.
So this is a movie that has a lot of silences, as you said at the Q&A, as well as, I would say, reasonably minimal dialogue. You keep it simple. And how did you work with your actors, and how many takes did you get?
I think we never did more than like 10. I think one time we did 10 takes, and that was only because we were having fun. It was like there was one scene where we just started laughing. We just kept going and having fun. But we do like 4 or 5 takes, and you sort of just figure out. Every actor is different. Sometimes they are really great on the first take and they sort of wind down, or sometimes they build up to it, and you sort of just figure out what each actor needs. And
So Casey and Rooney, how would they be different?
to be honest, I can't remember now, but the one thing I do know is that oh gosh, when they would do their scenes together, which there aren't that many, but it would always just get better and better, because they would just they had such a great rapport, and just watching them just expand upon what was on the page, or just build off of it, and Casey's very playful, and he brings that out in whoever he's performing with, which was always just wonderful to see. And he loves to just try things out, and he always would want to ask for a take where he could just throw everything away and just try something new, which was always just really fun to see, and a lot of that wound up in the movie, because he would just have these great ideas that he would he wouldn't tell me what they are. He'd be like, hey, let me just have one to try something, and
One of my favorite shots is early in the movie when they're getting arrested, and it's actually a shot that you use in your marketing materials.
yeah.
When the two of them are knowing they're going to be separated for a long time, inevitably, their two bodies are just pressed against each other as they're both shackled.
Yeah.
How did that shot come about?
That was one that was in the script. Like, I knew that was, it was described exactly as it was shot, and when we knew that would be a very pivotal image for the film, because from that point on up until the last scene, they're separated for the whole film, and so basically we knew what it would be, and we knew it would be silent. I wanted it to be, there's no dialogue. It's almost like surrealistic in the degree which the other officers in the scene aren't talking or anything, and have a very mournful sort of funeral procession sort of march down this hill. And the direction I gave them was just, that this is the last time you're going to be together, so just try to stay as close together as possible. Try to just be together. And then I would tell the gentleman playing the police officers, just try to keep them apart. And that was it. And we did 4 or 5 takes of that, and it was just heartbreaking every time. It was it was such a it was the kind of thing that we knew needed to be there, because you wanted to feel like that separation was strong, but also that it had to sustain it for the rest of the movie, that sense of wanting to get back together, and so we wanted to make sure that separation was very, punch in the gut, and so I think
you
everybody.
manipulate us a bit too with the idea that she could be longing to have the security that Ben Foster would offer. There's
Yeah.
a real lull, a real lure, a real tug
Exactly.
there.
I think that is the great thing about it, is that they're both great choices in so many ways. The one thing that galvanizes the situation is that she has a child, which changes things. If that hadn't been there, if Sylvie hadn't been in the picture, then, you know, who's to say which is the better choice? And one obviously is riskier, but it's still like that represents the grand, romantic, passionate side of things, and the other one is, there's a responsibility and a security to that, and they're both. I really wanted there to never be a moment where you felt one was better than the other, aside from the fact that she had the daughter. That's always the thing that changes things, and I really, I feel like both Patrick Wheeler, Ben Foster's character, and Bob Muldoon are basically just both sides of my personality, and that I vacillate between both all the time.
We're talking the renegade maverick and
the guy who is responsible and pragmatic and honest, and
You need both to be a filmmaker.
you do, because for myriad reasons, but and then I'm always bouncing back and forth between the two, and that's what Ruth is doing in the film. Is like, they both have incredibly strong pulls on her, and they both represent something that she needs. And so it's definitely I wanted there never to be a moment where you felt that she was definitely going one way versus the other. It was always, rather than, she does make a decision at some point in the film, but it's not a decision she's not choosing one guy over the other by any means.
She's choosing to protect her
Exactly,
child,
exactly.
and she does so. And we all sit there thinking, yes, that's the right thing to do.
That's the only way it could be the right thing, is because the child changes the situation.
Were you surprised at how good Keith Carradine was?
No, I mean, I knew he'd be awesome. It's funny because McCabe, Mrs. Miller is one of my all-time favorite films, and when we started casting that part, I was like, it'd be so cool if we got Keith Carradine in it. And
he's still powerful.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
He's
and he's a Western guy.
Yeah, he brings that mystique and that aura to it, and like he's one of those actors who brings his history along with him, but it doesn't feel like acute in any sort of way. He has that majesty to him that completely just owns the screen.
It's true. It's true.
And
yet he's still very authentic and doesn't ring false.
Yeah, completely. He's got that great voice.
And now I'm gonna have to edit this now.
No, no worries. Please edit me.
The whole issue of Terrence Malick.
Yes.
I mean, clearly, Austin filmmaker, Magic Hour, Badlands.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. It's
Of course.
inescapable. It can be a comparison that is good, and it can be a comparison that is, what are you too close?
Yeah.
Are you imitating him? I would argue strenuously that you're not. That whatever the good. Magic Hour is for everyone.
Yes.
But address that, if you would.
To be honest, I love Terrence Malick. I love all his movies, and Badlands, I think, is probably my favorite. I really love it, and that certainly was in mind when I started developing this film. I think that it is, in many ways, taking off from, the ideas of those characters, the archetypes that are in both that film and Bonnie and Clyde. We're obviously playing in the same ballpark. At the same time, I don't think it's a very Malick-y movie, but
it's
got
way more controlled. In
yeah,
this weird way.
It's got especially with his films now.
Did you see Through the Wonder?
I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen him shoot, and it's you put a 25mm lens on the camera and just rove around, and we used a 25mm once or twice in the whole film, and everything's very locked off. There's very little handheld, and we only used it for specific points. And it does have magic hour. Magic Hour is undeniably beautiful, and there are those sweeping shots of walking up the hills. Certainly, I mean, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for comparing it, but I also feel, I was surprised at how consistent it came up because, I mean, I was like, oh, people are just going to be accusing me of ripping off Robert Altman or Paul Thomas Anderson or all these other filmmakers who I sort of had in the back of my head a lot while we were developing it. And when Brad and I were planning everything, like we never once looked at a Malick movie. So I will take the comparisons because I think it's a wonderful thing to be compared to someone whose work I admire so much. But there's a lot more to it, I think, in terms of like the history that the film builds upon and references. And
this is a narrative film. It's a very straightforward narrative film. I like the way that you describe what you do in terms of picking the moments that's where I think your signature lies.
Yeah.
But also the sound. That modernizes it a good deal.
Yeah.
It makes it come to a different place.
It really, I mean, part of that's just technology, that you can use sound that with that degree of precision now, and audiences can interpret it in a way that in older films, like as the technology's developed, audiences have become tuned to how to process that information, and I think that it's one of the most important tools filmmakers have in their toolbox now is sound. And I think
what exactly was that?
The clapping, that's part of the score, and it's literally just either a knee slap or hand claps or both. And
it's not spoons.
No. Daniel Hart, the composer, this is his first feature film. He did a little bit of music for Saint Nick, and then that movie had almost no music in it, and then he did my short film Pioneer, and he's the first composer I've ever worked with. Not that I've worked with many or any, but I was always worried that I would have trouble conveying what I want musically, and I met him, and when I was doing Saint Nick, I needed like one piece of music, and I was having trouble finding someone who got what we were trying to do, and I told him what the movie was about. I met him through Toby Halbrooks, my producer. They grew up together, and he went off and just wrote some music, and it was so perfect that it just dropped right into the movie, and was like, oh, great. And then with Pioneer, he watched the rough cut and came back with a finished score, and it was perfect again. And he's on the same wavelength. He gets what I want. And so with this film, he read the script, came down to set while we were shooting, watched us shoot some scenes, and then looked at some dailies. And then about 2 weeks into the editing process, he sent me that track that plays while Bob is getting taken to prison and writing the first letter. And I heard those hand claps and was like, all right, we've done it again. He really, I mean, I don't have to give him very much at all, and he gets what we're after. And it's such a wonderful psychic connection. That's what you're always wanting.
So is the Weinstein Co. going to release your movie?
I don't know. They based on the cast and the script, they picked up the foreign sales rights at Cannes last year, so they're hard at work on that. But as far as the domestic side of things, we're just keeping our fingers crossed and talking to people and seeing what happens. It's really an interesting place to be as a filmmaker, because having made these smaller films where you just do everything yourself, now I have people who are that's their job to handle it, and so I just get phone calls and say, hey, come meet this person here, or come do this, and what do you think about this, and so much of the legwork is getting done, and I just gotta go. It's nice to let other people who are really good at that job do it, and I can focus on what I'm doing best, which is showing the movie.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much.